requirements are exactly the same and the deliverables are exactly the same. So the service, so to speak, should be the same. It's the same exact thing.
Can you talk about funding a little bit? Because I know was there a reduction this year in funding or not?
There was a slight overall. I'm looking at Alyssa, 5%. So I think it was maybe like 93-ish last year for the region. Now it's 88 for the region. You know, it has steadily started to decrease. So we don't have any signs that it's, you know, going to increase anytime soon. Let's not say, may stay even for a little while, but it depends a lot on the CDC funding, because like I said, it's state match. So if CDC funding changes in this particular pot of public health emergency preparedness funding, that's when then the state match funding will change as well, the amount. I'll add, sorry, one more thing. The other way, just so for mechanics of it, because the region only gets $88,000 for MRC funding, how it has worked for several years now is that each unit, so right now, you know, 3 units, you each get a certain allocation based on the number of towns within your unit. So the way the funding works is I believe it's a little over $1,000 per town, which is why going into this current fiscal year that we're ending, at that point, you know, a year ago, Greater Grafton I think only had 4 towns, and then it would have been really small funding, right? Because it was a certain amount per town, and that's when towns from Worcester Regional were migrating over to Greater Grafton to really boost up the amount of money, right, to make it at least more sustainable or financially feasible. But every unit also has the opportunity to go in front of the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Coalition and request additional funding to help support their MRC allocation. And so that is never a guarantee, but it can help support that, although I believe the deadline may have passed. The deadline passed for that this year because the FEP coalition is meeting, and then all the budgets have to be, you know, finalized and sent to the state so that they can be approved before July 1. So there has historically been that option to try to supplement with some FEP funding to get a little more money. But that's never given each year, depending on what the coalition has earmarked that money for already.
And then the training piece, I think people might be concerned that if training might be in Worcester versus here. I don't know where we've had trainings in the past. I assume they've been in one of the 16 other communities, which could be any place. But can you talk about what?
Yep. So I would say, so for Worcester Regional, our coordinator does a really good job trying to, especially because of the size, right, trying to make it so that they're not all in Worcester. Quite frankly, a lot of people don't want to come to Worcester for a training, right? Worcester's only one city within the whole Worcester Regional. So making sure they're spread across the region so that they're not all in one geographic area. The deliverables require, I believe, 4 trainings a year, 1 per quarter. In terms of outreach events, you know, if there's tabling events going on in a town for National Night Out or farmers markets or different things like that you would love a table set up. You know, I think you guys do that now in your town or your other towns, right? We do the same thing. You know, and then there's the response piece of somebody needs volunteers to open a shelter, open up an EDS site, staff a medical tent at a road race in town, right? That you put in a request to the coordinator to see if there's volunteers. You can never, it's the nature of a volunteer, right, group. You can never guarantee you're going to get anybody, but you would put in that request. So the services should be comparable. You know, it's really, you know, it's totally the town's call. Like I said, you know, Worcester Regional's not dying to bring on 1 million more towns. If towns don't have a unit and they're interested in joining Worcester, we can certainly have that conversation with the town, but the service should be the same because it's deliverable-based funding.
But now can't the host town actually get more money for being the host agency? Aren't they allowed to take an additional percentage because they're the host agency?
Yes. So
So you
towns
technically could be getting more than you're getting.
no, the town takes the max amount, which I believe is 600 for the year, because the percentage is so low. Am I right? It's the town gets $600 a year to host. It's 3%. So there is a small percent. It's more enticing when it's a larger pot of money. Obviously, you're starting with because it's a percentage of that pot of funding.
So I think personally that funding's pretty important, obviously, but we're also just talking about changes where I don't think we're gonna draw the number of, local volunteers if we go that route.
I'm looking at some of these towns, like some of the new 12 towns, because we had Grafton originally, then it became Grafton, Northbridge, Sutton, and Westboro. And now we've got beyond those Bellingham, Blackstone, Douglas, Franklin, Hopedale, Medway, Mendon, Milford, Millville, Northborough, Upton, and Uxbridge.
And I don't know exactly if it was a federal, focus, but I think it really is, they're interested in keeping things kind of local, you know? And so personally, I think we should explore the possibility of one of the 4 original, towns to see if someone is interested in taking up that challenge. And that might take a month or 2 to figure out. I don't know if there's any urgency here. And I mean, clearly Tim and his administration are frustrated with trying to manage it, and I can understand that. And it is a pretty daunting thing to think about taking on 12 other towns, and the communications involved in that are, will be pretty challenging. I don't know if anyone.
Do any of those current towns have an MRC?
I think they were rearranged. Hold on, let me pull it back up. It says MDPH, Mass DPH, encouraged the MRC regions back in 2018 across the state to reevaluate coverage areas within each unit in an effort to explore more appropriate funding formulas. As a result, the Regional Advisory Board for Region 2, which is what we sit in, voted to reassign those 12 towns to us. So those lived somewhere else before if they got reassigned.
They lived in Worcester.
They lived in
Regional.
Worcester. So I think geographically they were trying to divide them up.
But the conversation with Foley today was, they don't want one-offs for MRCs, they want to be as big as they can be, to have that critical mass of people in one geographic area to conserve a, within a 20, 30 mile radius, you can get there.
So the way that the volunteers are managed through a system called Mass Response, right, which is an online database, and so typically we find that volunteers are most interested in volunteering in their town,
Local.
or a town that borders them, or a town that has some significance to them. So we also find that in some cases people like volunteering just in nice towns, right? Towns that are quaint, that have nice events going on, right? And so I don't think we typically find, if we, I'm trying to think of an example. So for snowstorms. So a lot of times towns will reach out and say, I'm considering opening a shelter or a warming center. Would you be able to look and see if any volunteers are interested in coming to the warming center to help staff the warming center? Typically, we find responses. So in that case, which I assume was the same practice with Greater Grafton, is that you send it out to all of your volunteers, not just the town that's asking, right? Because and sometimes some towns may only have 10 or 12 people signed up in Mass Response, right? So you send it out to the masses and see what sticks. And so in many cases, people will write back to say, well, I'm more than interested in volunteering at a warming center, but only if it's in my town, right? Or in one of the towns next to me. So we don't find a lot that, you know, people feel that, you know, Worcester's getting all of the volunteers, right? Because Worcester's only one city of however many in our unit, and if you don't live in Worcester, typically we don't get outside volunteers to come and volunteer in the city. Not to say that doesn't happen, right? But people tend to volunteer in the town that they live in or a surrounding town of significance to them. So that's, you know, our practice. I assume it's the same with Greater Grafton, that you cast a wide net and you see what sticks for volunteers. Sometimes you get a lot. It depends on the event. We put volunteers on standby after the Boston Marathon bombing, and we got 80 or 90 people saying, I want to be put on standby. You do the same thing for a yearly flu clinic or for, you know, a warming center, and you get 3 or 4 people, right? It's not the same level of people that you get for some of those more routine requests. But you never know.
I think we had some other health departments that have representatives here.
Yeah. Can we have Lindsay talk?
Or
Yeah, I mean, now, is anyone in the audience, since I know we have a much larger audience than normal, since normally we have like 0 people, in the audience. I don't know if anyone wants to speak, since I'm guessing people are probably here for this topic.
Just come right up to
Yeah,
that.
and just,
Introduce
introduce
yourself.
Okay, hi, my name is Kristen Black. I'm actually a resident of Grafton, 3 Mason Drive, and I'm also the health director in the town of Uxbridge. So, small town, very similar feel. So I really understand what you guys are talking about with EDS and calls to town manager's office and saying, what's MRC anyway? So in Uxbridge, we struggle with this as well because many people have no idea what local boards of health do. So we have been through 5 town managers in the last 6 years, so I can guarantee you if you made a phone call right now to the town of Uxbridge, they would likely tell you they have no idea. They're not sure of that group. So it really comes down to the local board of health. And I think it's really important, and we've worked with Lindsay Fox, and it's been great having the more local MRC. In the past, the town of Uxbridge was part of the Worcester MRC. We didn't really have any interaction other than Mary Watson, who was directing it then, I think sent a letter once a year. But she was managing 72 towns. She was maybe part-time or very limited.
The model previous to reorganizing was that we had a main coordinator and then we had sub-regions. So Mary was the coordinator of a sub-region. So like that southeast corner that now fell under Lindsay.
Okay, and so we didn't have a lot of involvement, so we were excited when we heard Grafton was expanding and that was a new setup. So I would say from the town of Uxbridge, we saw that as a huge benefit. One, for training, nobody in Uxbridge is going to want to drive to Worcester. And a lot of these trainings or EDS drills are often at unfavorable times of the year when you're doing a warming shelter. And I think the most critical thing is maintaining volunteers. That's the greatest value to any community in this area. And I think when volunteers personally know who their coordinator is, they know them, they know how to call up, it's a sense of community, people are more likely to belong to that MRC. Grafton has great participation. Uxbridge does not, because we haven't had that time to build. So from my experience working in Uxbridge and being a resident of Grafton, I've always said, well, I'm glad I live in Grafton if an emergency hits because you guys are prepared. So it's a huge benefit, and I'm not saying to the town administrator, I understand there's a cost to it, so you might not get all your administrative costs reimbursed, but I think it's a great value to the residents, and I personally am grateful to be in this town and that it has been an active MRC. My mother is a member. She's a resident of Grafton, and she enjoys the training and that it's a sense of community, and that's why they're so active. You have an extremely active CERT team as well. So it's, I don't think, you might not hear about it, but they're doing their work and they're there. And so when an emergency happens, those are the people that are going to respond. So I really hope that Grafton as a residence is really going to consider it. And regarding EDS drills and some of the things we've seen in Uxbridge is we ran an EDS drill. We received a grant from FEP It was like over $4,000 to bring in JJ Burke, who's a faculty member at Boston University, to help us run that trail. I don't know if that's the same as with Grafton. We had great participation from town departments. We cast a very wide net. The only participation we didn't have in Grafton was our town manager and our board of selectmen. We had DPW, we had fire, police, everything. It was a big thing. But people need to learn. You need to build upon that. I mean, anytime you run an EDS drill, so it's that consistency, that building. And we had, I think, at least 3 members of the Greater Grafton MRC that attended the EDS drill in Uxbridge to learn from that and support us. So that training and that relationship is really important. And I think it was only because of the coordination with Lindsay Fox, MRC even attended our EDS drill, which we found to be very successful. So I understand the money, but I think, I'm grateful Grafton has this. I really encourage you all to think hard. And I think it's a huge benefit to the residents. It's also a benefit to surrounding communities. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jean Gnatic. I work for the Northbridge Board of Health, and I can remember when we were first part of Worcester and we received nothing. I begged to join Grafton, and I was so glad when we did. We got great representation. Lindsay's been a peach to work with. We work together in recruiting volunteers. It's just been wonderful. It's very different. It's like Kristen said, it's that community. Again, yes, we understand financially there's always an issue. But I think before there's any talk of dissolving the Greater Grafton MRC, I think it's imperative that each of the towns that's a member of that, we just found out about this. So we're just finding out, and it's like, wait a minute, this affects us. So I think before any talk about dissolving it, I think we need a meeting with these towns or some sort of outreach and say, are you interested? This is what it entails. Are you willing to take it on to keep it alive? I don't understand what you say when you say you can join the Worcester MRC, but if you don't want to, you don't have to. What happens to those towns? I received no benefit. Northbridge received no benefit as part of the Worcester MRC. So if Northbridge says, yeah, we're on our own, what does that do to us?
So that would just mean that you're not, you wouldn't have a coordinator to do volunteer. You wouldn't have a coordinator outside of, I guess, someone in your town to do any, recruitment or to, send out requests for volunteers, right? So if there was something going on in your town, you wouldn't have a unit to fall back on to say, hey, we're really swamped. We have X going on. Can you, go into mass response and click and look for volunteers for us? You wouldn't be affiliated with a unit, which is fine. You don't need to be affiliated with a unit. But that would be the difference. You would be a town that just wasn't affiliated with a Medical Reserve Corps unit. And a lot of towns, if you have a CERT in your town, if you have a really active CERT, you may feel that we put a lot of time, money, and resources into our CERT team, and so we train them. We would call on them. So some town, I can't speak to why towns would or would not want to, but you just wouldn't be affiliated with an actual federally recognized unit.
Okay.
That'd be the
You
difference.
talked about the Worcester MRC reaching out, or MRCs having the ability to reach out for additional funding. Can you tell me how much additional funding the Worcester MRC or the Wachusett MRC has reached out and obtained?
So, I can't speak to Wachusett. I know she's gotten some MEMA grants, I think, before, maybe, or other fund. I can't speak to what her funding is. For Worcester Regional, we have only ever relied on the MRC funding or getting requesting supplemental funding through the Public Health Emergency Preparedness Coalition. We've never looked for additional funding sources. So I know people do it and it's out there. I'm just not overly aware. We haven't done it.
Okay, because you kind of made it sound like Lindsay wasn't doing her best to obtain that additional funding, and the other MRCs were.
No,
That's what
I'm
it
not at
sounded
all.
like sitting in the
I'm not at all.
audience,
I
so.
just
I just
I
wanted to
know others
clarify.
do it. Worcester has not. I know Wachusett has. I don't know what that funding is or how to obtain it. 'cause
Or what
we
the
don't.
amount is.
Or what the amount is. It would depend on, I think, where you were looking to get your funding from, where you were applying.
And Grafton has received federal grants just to
So yeah, I would just ask that before you consider dissolving, that the other towns be made aware, number one. I'm here tonight, my board members don't even know about this. I have a Board of Health meeting tomorrow night, so I will update them. But, you know, these towns have no idea of what's being discussed this evening, and I don't think that's fair.
Yeah,
So
we
I
just
would,
found out too,
We just found out, too.
through
Yeah.
the federal side of the world,
yeah,
actually.
so I
via
would just
email.
ask that, you know, that opportunity be given, because I know there's a lot of towns in the Greater Grafton MRC that are ecstatic to have Lindsay on board, love having our local MRC, and would have volunteers that probably wouldn't participate. You've got that name Worcester MRC, and there's just something, this region is just, we don't want to be involved in Worcester. Worcester's a city, we're a small town, a small community. We don't want to be involved with that title. It just, we love our little communities and we love our Greater Grafton MRC. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tim, did you reach out to any of the 15 towns to tell them you were doing this before it was announced?
I called, like I said,
Yep.
the people that I know, and they had no idea what I was talking about. I didn't, individual members of boards of health, they may have been contacted by Lindsay and been approached and said, yeah, we'll do that, for obvious reasons, right? Because it's a good deal. There's not a lot that they have to do, and it all rests with us. And it's not a popularity contest. This is an emergency dispensing site or an emergency situation that someone needs to be accountable and control of. That's what we have to deal with, not people are great, I don't want to have a Worcester attached to my name. It doesn't matter. We're in the state of Massachusetts. We are going to be in a crisis at some point. We're going to have serious, serious help when that happens. It has nothing to do with I don't like. We're all going to have to come together in a tragedy no matter what. So I just think that this model, if there's a better model out there, it has to be thought of in that mass casualty incident or a general emergency or a disaster that can be focused and not relied on because the contractor was great or we like Greater Grafton, it sounds better than Worcester. It's just,
Now, I understand, the contract was signed by the Board of Selectmen. Were the selectmen made aware of this decision? If the contract was signed for this as the host agency by the Board of Selectmen, did they make the decision to do
no,
this?
I made the decision not to make the recommendation to continue the contract. And so when we talked to GMA and we get on the Board of Health's agenda,
Excuse me, GMA didn't know about it until we went there on Thursday night.
exactly, and
Right.
Becca was there to talk about that, and that's what.
And the decision had already been made when we showed up at that GMA meeting on Thursday night.
The decision not to recommend a contract extension
Correct.
certainly was.
Yes, and
And
don't you
the
think GMA
email.
should have been should have been notified? The head of emergency management in the town
I talked to Ray Mead.
before that meeting?
Yes, I did.
Well,
I didn't tell him what my final outcome was. I told him what I was contemplating. But that meeting is where you tell people when you've made a decision. I'm sure you don't expect me to make a call to 27 people and tell them what I've decided for the day.
no, but when we showed up at that emergent GMA meeting, they weren't aware of that this decision had already been made.
Oh,
Don't
how
you think,
else would I
don't
tell
you
them
think
to do that?
everybody that was involved should have been sitting at the table?
Involved in what?
Like emergency management?
Involved in making the
Police-
decision for Greater Grafton MRC?
Yes. Who signed the contract for that?
The Board of Selectmen?
And did the Board of Selectmen all sit around and discuss this?
No, they did not.
So don't you think they should have been sitting around the table discussing it since they're the one that signed the contract?
I am not recommending them to continue with the contract. When we have that discussion, when I tell them that, we'll have that discussion just like we're having this, but it has to start someplace. GMA, here, the Board of Selectmen,
It sounds like it's already at a done deal
The email went to the state
to say that
from
we've already, right,
Becca on Thursday afternoon saying we're turning this over.
right. But you're saying you already made that decision before you actually notified everybody,
I'm notifying people.
after the fact.
eh.
After you've already, after Becca
Yeah,
has
well,
already notified the
let's think
state.
of it logistically, right? I have a contract that's gonna expire June 1,
Mm-hmm.
or July 1st, June 30. What is the Board of Health's recommendation to me to do differently than what I've done?
But this isn't about, this email is not about
Right.
the contract. This email is about,
The MRC
Yeah,
being
but what
involved.
service,
itself.
the service is the service, whether it's Greater Grafton, the MRC, or the contract, because the contract covers what the deliverables are for the grant. that pays that contract.
Does
I'm just asking for you to tell me what you think I should do, given 2 months prior to the expiration of the contract. I don't wanna renew. I reached out on the 16th when I learned that I wasn't gonna do this to the Board of Health to have that discussion May 16th. And now it's May 3rd, and here we are. So what do you see us doing for July 1 to have this piece of critical infrastructure for the town for emergency management and preparedness? What do we do?
Well, you can't go
My
back.
solution is to go to the Alliance. That's what my solution is.
But it's not purely
it's
just
not
the
the
alliance. The email on May
not
30th
the
says we're
alliance.
turning over the whole Greater Grafton Medical Reserve Corps to the Alliance or MRC, which are technically two different things. We understand that this means losing our federal designation, and moving forward, we'll be served by the Worcester MRC. That email on May 30th at 2:30 p.m. from Becca to Liz Foley at the state, with you on copy, or you in the two field, means that you already made the decision to dissolve the MRC, not just the contract, but to actually
Correct.
dissolve the MRC.
Correct.
That was done in a vacuum.
Because I need to have that program in place for July 1. If there's something you would like to recommend me to reconsider, I can do that. But I don't think there's another good option for the town of Grafton.
It's
From
not just
sustain-
the town
Not
of
the town
Grafton.
of Grafton, there are 16 towns.
Those other 16 are not forgotten and not left behind, and nor should it be our
And so have
responsibility.
we asked any of them if they'd like to take over?
For the third time, I did not ask for that, because I don't think that's an appropriate thing for us to do. I've made a recommendation to go to Worcester. That's my recommendation.
But you can't do that in the vacuum, according to the federal liaison. You need a
actually-
letter with all
I've had
16
many conversations
towns.
with Liz, and she's never said.
She's the state.
The federal, you need a letter
Jennifer.
from each of the separate towns that are members to say that
all-
they all
And will the
agree.
member be an individual member of a Board of Health, the chairman, or the town manager, or the Board of Selectmen? Who will that be?
Chairman of the Board of Health, and I think they should be known.
It should be on the Board of Health side / the Health Department, because that's who has to be in agreement to even start or join an MRC, is on the Health Department
Okay.
side. But that, per Jennifer Fredette at the federal level this morning when I spoke with her about this, said just a simple email doesn't dissolve it.
No, then it's not dissolved.
But it was still done in a vacuum. It was done without the Board of Selectmen, was done without the other towns. It's the lack of communication that got
But it
everyone.
hasn't been done, right? Because you told me that
intent
the email
was there.
doesn't, again, I'm working against the clock to provide a service for July 1. If there's a better way for us to go, I'm willing to listen to it.
Well, at this point, it's a little late.
Well, no, it's not, because you just told me that it takes more than what I've done. And I'm here listening to you. I've tried to reach out, I've tried to be more responsive, as the board has asked for, so I'm here.
So you're telling that this is a major decision that's going to impact the citizens, the residents of Grafton. But yet, when you made this decision, you didn't involve all the stakeholders. You should have had, if you were thinking about this 2 months ago, you should have had the Board of Selectmen, you should have had the Board of Health, you should have had GMA, you should have had the chief, police chief, fire chief, all the people responsible for
talked
the
to those
emergency.
people
No,
individually.
all together in the room, so everybody could have voiced their opinion
Okay.
and what they thought would be the best thing for Greater Grafton MRC.
And the other towns.
Right. For you and Becca to make this decision and tell us all after you've already sent a letter to the state is not appropriate. And now you're telling us you're concerned about the residents in the town of Grafton?
I'm always concerned about the residents of the town of Grafton.
Well, now, if we were to have
They're
an
the first-
emergency on July 3rd, 2 days after the contract, do you think there would be volunteers that would show up? Of course there would be.
Yes.
Grafton has
That's
a
great.
lot of volunteers between MRC and CERT.
Yep.
We've been told by other towns that Grafton has a very good volunteer response whenever there is an emergency situation.
That's great.
But you're telling us you're so concerned about it that you're going to send us to Worcester.
I'm not sending you to Worcester.
No, so then we should ask the other 16 or 15 towns if they would like to take over. You feel that it's too much for the town of Grafton to take care of these grants
My
and these
recommendation is
deliverables.
not to have another community take it over.
Your recommendation for the town of Grafton, for the MRC, is to go to Worcester.
My recommendation is for the town of Grafton to have those services provided by the city of Worcester. Not to have another community take it.
Well, I think the other 15 towns should be able to say what they want,
Okay?
because it's not just Grafton. And that's where I
So
think the
can you tell
downfall.
me who the 15 people are that I should call tomorrow morning?
I personally don't know their names. I'm sure Lindsay could speak to it. Lindsay, would you like to get up and speak?
I do not know everyone's name.
No,
I'm
but you
Miss
did talk to
Lindsay, I'm
somebody
the-
in every region.
I'm sorry.
You did talk to somebody in every town.
In terms of doing the expansion project, yes, absolutely.
And I'm sure
The
we-
health departments are all aware of the fact that the expansion has taken place. I have not informed all the health departments that the unit would be dissolved, because at the GMA meeting that we were present at, Becca had asked me to sort of take a step back and not include myself in that sense, that y'all would be the people to inform the town. So I've stayed out of it.
Do you have a contact, each of the town's board, chairman of the boards of health?
Say again?
Do you have each of the
Oh, yeah,
other
the,
15 towns?
yes.
Worst case, I'm sure they all have websites that we could find.
I
you
have
on.
it,
I know I'm
actually, we
listed
have an
on this,
Excel
the whole board's
document
listed
just
on the site.
as a
so-
part of communication with MRC. We have an Excel document with all the contact info for every police, fire, and health department, so I can send that to y'all.
And they've all written a letter of intent to join the Greater Grafton MRC.
Yes, there's two things I want to comment on. One is that the letter that Tim is referring to does state in there that it was for this fiscal year. So I understand why he says it was for this year. Because this whole funding formula thing is new for all of us, in terms of what Region 2 established and what we decided on. So I get that. And then in terms of the, having all the letters, there's 2 towns that we have been waiting for, because I've received verbal okays from individuals within the town. No, they were not town administrators, but those 2 towns that are remaining for written approval is Mendon and Milford. So again, if there needs to be a change, like say we do keep Greater Grafton MRC, I don't know where we stand with that, but if we do keep it and the 16 towns do stay, I could understand why, like, reissuing a letter that has like a permanent state on there rather than saying Lindsay is the contact for the fiscal year. I could understand where that would be a need.
But deeper than that, though, Madam Chair, just who, Lindsay mentioned fire chief, police chief, chairman, Board of Health. You want me to reach out to 16 individual communities times 3 and ask them what they think about the Greater Grafton MRC, or
Well, it could just be
Who-
one
who
email
would I
to
speak-
16 people.
Becca
or if
agreed
that
to
is-
to reach out to the 16 towns to ask if any of them would be interested in taking over the host.
but the people she talked to might be different than the people I talked to. So can you understand my confusion?
But who's the one that's going to, obviously, it's gonna have to probably be town manager, town administrator, something like that, because they're the ones who are gonna have to be dealing with.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the
of
Board of
course.
Health.
But the
will
Board
be
of Health
most
is the one-
knowledgeable about the world of MRCs and the requirements.
So when you
that
created
go
the
along.
first 5 towns, or 4,
For.
what was that? You were all here. What was that agreement? Who was it with? Independent of Lindsay before she got here.
Well,
I'd have
to
to go back
begin
to the
with, when the
letters.
Grafton MRC started as a federally, we were run by the health agent. The health agent ran all of the MRC functions. Then after that, after the town no longer had a health agent, then it was the town nurse who ran all of the MRC events. And then after the town nurse was no longer here, then it became a position that we hired Dawn Farmer, and she became the one who ran the MRC. She got paid through grants, and she continued to do that. Once she left, then all of a sudden, that's when a lot of these changes were happening, and it needed to be a contract as through the host agency through Worcester.
What was the woman's name again who worked in your office?
First, it started with Lois, then it went to Trish, and then it
Tricia.
went to Dawn Farmer.
Dawn Farmer, but Dawn Farmer was here when Lois was here.
Right.
Yes.
But she was performing that function, so it couldn't have been the nurse.
That wasn't her function when she first started. When she first started her function, she was working a few mother's hours under the MRC grant to help Lois with some of the functions.
So different funding than the MRC we're talking about today?
Correct. All the requirements, the regulations, the deliverables, all that have all changed over the years, yes.
And we were receiving the NACHO
NACHO grant, yep.
And so that was like a pretty steady income at that point. which we do still have NACHO funds to pull from as well. I think it's important to highlight that for the Greater Grafton MRC, it is more than just one grant that can help fund our organization, no matter who the host agency is.
So we had several grants that we would receive over the course of the year. We would have deliverables, but they weren't as strict as the deliverables that are there now with the state and with the federal government. But we did have deliverables in order to get our grants. And that's when we actually started doing our flu clinics. We ran them as emergency dispensing site for training. And then we would get our grant money for that. But now we can no longer run our flu clinics as emergency dispensing site and expect to get grant money for that. That's
So-
not one of the allowable deliverables anymore.
So Westboro, Upton, Millbury,
Northbridge,
Grafton, what the original, I'm trying to find out who those original
I think it was
The
Grafton.
original was Sutton North.
communities
In
were they executed by the administrator, the Board of Health, or by the Board of Selectmen?
It's Grafton, Northbridge, Sutton, and Westboro. And we'd have to go back to the letters that were part of it. I don't remember off the top of my
I
head.
don't remember. Off the top.
Fundamentally, there's a reshift here. I mean, you can see that there's fundamental flaws with not knowing who's in charge in any community from making a decision of putting together a coalition of 16 communities. Clear, that's crystal clear.
I mean, every town kind of operates differently. Not that that's my place to say, but I do think it is fair to suggest that every town does operate differently.
Yeah, I think that is true, but that's problematic when you're trying to deal with an emergency crisis if you don't know who's actually in charge.
Absolutely.
That's a problem.
The
That's
state,
the essence
And
of
that's,
emergency
and that's one
planning.
nice way to have a small volunteer group, because everybody works well when they work with somebody that they know, that they've worked with before, that they can trust, as opposed to going, nothing against Worcester, but going off to Worcester. Everyone would prefer to stay in their own area where they know the staff, they know the people, the volunteers, and they've worked with them in the past,
Yeah.
and they can rely on them.
Yeah, I know that we do have some MRC volunteers here as well. If y'all have any other questions for me, I'd be more than happy to answer, but I do know that there's other people that wanted to comment.
Any other comments?
No other questions?
anyone else in the audience?
I just want to make it crystal clear. I'm here tonight as the deputy director for the Alliance.
Yes,
I am
understand.
not here to try to take over any towns as part of the Worcester Regional MRC. That is not my job of being here tonight. Whatever the town of Grafton decides, if they are going to or not continue on as the leader of the Greater Grafton unit, that's a decision to be made by Grafton. A separate decision based on that one is if any other town wants to take on as leader of the Greater Grafton MRC. That has no bearing, quite frankly, on Worcester Regional. And in the event that neither one of those options take place and any town is or is not interested, they can reach out to Worcester Regional. In terms of funding, I do know, because of the number of towns that the unit has and the funding formula, and because it is past the deadline to request supplemental public health emergency preparedness funding through that coalition, the unit has about $19,000 of MRC funding for the year. So not to say you can't go out and look for additional funding, but for the funding that we provide, we as in the city of Worcester as the host agent for Region 2, the unit is allocated currently $19,000. Currently, if there's no consensus, the state essentially will keep that $19,000 until it's figured out who's going to use it, if, or no one at all. But it's completely separate in terms of, you know, Grafton's decision on continuing to be leader or not. If somebody else in a different town wants to be leader, I would ask in your conversations, if you have them with other towns and there is a town that is interested in it, that whoever the decision maker in that town would have to have conversations with the city in terms of that contractual piece, and certainly also conversations with Liz Foley at Mass DPH. So that's something that would also have to occur. But I just want to be crystal clear that I'm in no way here in any way to try to absorb everybody else. That is not our intent. Quite frankly, we're not looking to take on more work in more towns, but if there are towns that didn't have anybody and were interested, we would certainly be willing to try to help.
Sorry, just one more thing is that tomorrow morning is the FET meeting. I will not be at that meeting tomorrow, but I would like to just go on the record and suggest that maybe that would be an appropriate time and place to recommend a host agency or town to consider it, because all the towns of the Blackstone Valley are pretty much, or at least the towns that we oversee, are the ones that will be participating in the FET meeting. So that could, I think, Dan, you're going to that tomorrow?
I'm going, yeah. So
That could be a good place to sort of
right. I
consider
suspect-
that.
Also, I suspect there would be a name change, you know, to South Central, if someone wants to step up to the plate and
Yeah,
a town.
I would
say-
assume.
I would assume, yeah.
And, but yeah, I'll see how many people I can talk to tomorrow at the boards of health.
In addition, I mean, I do know that there are towns with, I don't want to state who they are, but I do know that there are towns within the Greater Grafton region who have expressed an interest to be, to act as a host agent. I think what they are looking to do is kind of like dot the i's, cross the t's with their internal folks before they come forward with that. So I just want to state that. And then the other thing is that should we do remain the Greater Grafton MRC, we were informed a couple months ago that it would be okay for us to apply to other grants. So there were grants that we had in mind to apply for by the end of this month. So that's something I can certainly offer more information on at a later time. But if we do stay the Greater Grafton MRC, there are other grants that we had planned to pursue.
And Lindsay, you are in place in your position until the end of the month, correctly?
Yes, my contract ends June 30th,
Okay.
which means we wanted to have the grants done by June 30th.
So if that's okay with the other members, I'd be happy to reach out, or at least make it aware what's going on to some of these other boards of health tomorrow.
That'd be great. You don't want to lose the volunteers.
No.
Let's see if anyone else wants to comment.
Hi, I'm Tracy Tortison. I live at 132 North Street and resident of Grafton and also an MRC volunteer. I found out about MRC, I don't know, a year and a half ago. I came to one of the mental health trainings or drug addiction trainings and fell in love with Lindsay. And I know you don't necessarily want to hear how great she is or what a great contractor she is, but she has done tremendous things. And I know part of the Worcester MRC, they have quarterly trainings. In Grafton, we've had probably 40 trainings at least. So that keeps the members active. And not only do we have members in Grafton, we have members from surrounding communities such as Worcester and Douglas and I don't know, from everywhere, yeah, just because of the reputation of the Greater Grafton MRC. So I think that it's important that we figure out how to maintain this, and if we need to go to another host community, absolutely. But this is a great thing that Grafton has. It's a great thing that Greater Grafton has, the other 16 communities that have joined us. I know Lindsay has been working on trying to get, establish the 16 communities as one, as opposed to what each different community is doing. So I ask that you give it more time. I mean, can we just extend it 6 months, extend our contract 6 months versus a year? Let's see what we can do to gather these towns to kind of form this great coalition, as opposed to, what one town is doing or what another town is doing. If Lindsay needs that help, she can put a call out and we can get volunteers to help her do what she needs to do, fill out grants or do whatever. But my recommendation would be to at least extend her contract for forever. But if not, let's do it for at least 6 months to see what we can do for the 16 towns, to see if we can form that Greater Grafton or South Central Massachusetts coalition going forward.
Can I ask a question? If Lindsay's contract was to be extended for 6 months, I'm just saying, and we became members of another host town, is the contract with the town per se, or is it with the Greater Grafton MRC? The contractor Lindsay's position,
Lindsay's position is with the town.
with the town of Grafton?
With the town of
Only with
Grafton,
Grafton?
yes.
Okay. So then if we became part of another MRC, then they would have the option of hiring Lindsay if they wanted, or their own contractor?
Correct.
Okay.
Or if they had an employee, right?
If they had an employee that could do that. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would it be possible to get contracts with any of the other towns that do benefit from the Greater Grafton MRC? Instead of us just.
That's what I love public file. Hello.
Hi, Jay Gardner. I'm from 10 Fay Mountain Road in Grafton, former member of the Board of Health. I have the unique perspective here of having started the MRC. Actually, it grew out of the MMRS program. So I have a little bit of historical. Some of this is accurate, some of it is, quite frankly, distorted. What is profoundly misunderstood here is that public health is built on the principle of participation. It's participatory, right? Public health is not just delivered. It takes community engagement. The fact that we would step away from an opportunity to expand upon something shows a profound misunderstanding and, quite frankly, a low public health IQ. It is an opportunity. The Alliance itself, I started the Alliance. Shrewsbury was a partnership. It has tripled in size. Dan Morgado, Mike O'Brien, myself at the time, we didn't say, well, gee, we're not going to grow this bigger. No, there's an opportunity there. And that's what this is, an opportunity. It's an opportunity to stay local. You only have to watch TV to see what's happening. Take a look at Ohio. Take a look at Pennsylvania. Any storm that happens on the South Shore, communities pull together. If you don't understand what Lindsay has been doing, you haven't been paying attention. If the selectmen don't know what has been going on in this town, they're just not paying attention. And that's crystal clear. Unfortunate, but very clear. You understand as the Board of Health what has gone on here. This has grown exponentially. And the benefit is to the community, the individuals, medical, and across all different disciplines. We have an opportunity here. Nothing against Worcester. Wonderful what has happened. I saw the MMRS program grow and then dissolve. The MRC program, what has happened? It's an opportunity for the Grafton MRC to actually stay local. There isn't, talk about finance is interesting to me. It's almost laughable when I think about it. There isn't a public health community in the entire United States that runs at a profit. It is unimaginable to think that this is an enterprise account. But I can tell you, when that disaster hits, and when there's a problem, the economic and social disruption is devastating. That's what the MRC does. It mitigates social, economic, and personal disruption. It's an opportunity. I would encourage the board to please extend this, engage others. Karen, I'm going to tell you, Chairman, for you to read that email, didn't say that the town administrator came here to listen and look for recommendations. He came here to deliver his decision. That is incredibly unfortunate. You folks are the ones. You have the responsibility to put this together. With the guidance of Worcester, there's an opportunity here. It is not, the word was made in a vacuum, absolutely clear. We didn't come here to say, geez, what are our thoughts here? This might not be working well. You reach out to those others. I can tell you in Worcester, this goes back when Worcester first started. Auburn wanted to be the host agency. Fitchburg wanted to be the host agency. And we had those discussions. As it turned out, Worcester stayed to be the host agency. But those are healthy discussions. Those discussions haven't happened. Those skill sets the leadership skills here don't exist here. But they should. They exist on the Board of Health. You can have those discussions. And you can build a better product. That's what the opportunity is. And I would tell you, I would recommend to you strongly to keep Lindsay Fox as the administrator, whoever runs, whatever community runs this. You have a gem. She understands it. So quite frankly, she hasn't even been, well, I know labor law. She hasn't even been paid, quite frankly. Hopefully, town council is aware of that because quite frankly, that's triple damages. And I'm sure you know that. I'm
I'm
sure
talking
you know
about
that.
legal issues.
Okay, but please know
It's
that.
not appropriate.
But please know that.
Here.
Please,
Well-
no, I was advice to you, Tim. I was trying to give you
I
advice.
appreciate
So
it.
listen, I
At the
hope you
peril of
understand that
18,000
what you
people.
want to do.
That's great.
What you want to do is to be able to build something, an opportunity to bring people in. To bring people in, that's important, okay? I wish you luck. I'm here. I was here, I helped assemble the MRC program in Worcester. Great job. There's an opportunity here in Grafton as well. Please look forward to it, and I look forward to your decisions, what you're doing. Thanks.
If I may. The Alliance, out of necessity and economics, had to grow. And when we want to expand, the last sentence was about inclusion in the growth. The growth of the MRC to Greater Grafton, the reason why you needed more town was to get more money. That's why you did it. So let's not pretend we're doing it for some grandiose public health purpose.
We didn't do it.
It's
We did
economics.
to assign
I'm
them.
addressing Mr. Gardner's
I don't know
comments.
it.
So I just wanted to be clear to folks. It's nice to have one perspective. You need a very broad perspective to have a level IQ, not just about public health.
I apologize, and I don't want to have a debate. This is the last time I'll come up, quite frankly, I'll exit. I can tell you, when I brought the Alliance here to Grafton, okay? I went to Tim. I said, Tim, we have a better model here, okay? And you know what his response was? I don't know anything about it. So please, don't lecture me. Don't lecture me about public health. Understand, you've outsourced it. It's an opportunity. I get that. You said, listen, you don't know a lot. It was not done for those reasons. It just isn't. There's a critical mass that you build. There's a critical mass, and I understand that. I've been in public health for 30 years. Please don't tell me how we built this. But I'm glad it's working here. I'm glad the community is benefiting. I'm glad Lindsay Fox is part of the MRC. Great job. Yeah.
Karen, do you want to see if anyone else wants to speak before we make a motion?
Anyone else want to speak before?
We have a motion to make.
All right, take that as a no.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to ask the Board of Selectmen and the Town Administrator to consider extending the current contract, maybe for 3 months, while we look into the possibility of another host, agency, another town hosting it.
Would Worcester be one of those towns?
They're not part of the current
They're not
unit.
part of the current 16. So I would like to look, I would like to look into the possibility of one of the 16 towns taking over. I'd like to make that motion.
I'll second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
And we can revisit this. We're kind of over time, but maybe revisit this at our next meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, I think one of the recommendations that was made at the GMA meeting was that you need to have all the stakeholders at the table, when you're making decisions like this. So maybe that's what we need to do, is get the people involved, before these decisions are made.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next on our agenda, oh, I didn't even read it. So you realize now, tomorrow night I'm not gonna be reappointed.
Yeah, I know.
No,
know
I
you
can't
did
do
a vote.
that.
So can we go out of order, since I know poor Julie's been
Finn's waiting here.
sitting
No,
here?
go ahead, come on.
No.
Yes. All yours, Julie.
Yeah,
Yes,
please do.
and did you sign in? Or you can sign
do
in when
it
you're
after.
done, but just make sure you sign in.
No, lot to follow up. So this is about the float tank.
Float
correct?
tank.
Yep.
My name is Julie Bovenzi Bellarosa, and I own Truth Organic Spa, and I would like to ask permission to have a float tank in my spa. I built my business from a one-room place in the back of 202 Worcester Street, and I've grown it in 13 years, and I worked really hard to do that. And I have really looked into different apparatuses, float tanks, and I found one that is more expensive, and I feel like it's really top notch. And the North American Float standards have 2 ways of sanitizing, and this company has 4 ways of sanitizing. 3 that are on the, in the filtration, and then 1 is a recommendation of biguanide as a water sanitizer. I have things that you might not have in your package, because I just printed them out the other day. I got a message from Michael about, he had some other questions, so, and I had talked to Nancy, and she said print it out. So I have things, and you know what I found funny? Is that the float tank has 3 ways of sanitizing: hydrogen peroxide, UV light, ozone, and they're all accepted and recognized in Europe. And with my company, we're an organic spa, and people have asked me, how come you don't have any USA made products here? And my answer is always, Europe has the bar raised so high for organics. Their standards are high. They're just, and to read that hydrogen peroxide and UV disinfection and ozonation in water treatment is recommended there, just made me feel that much more confident in these ways of disinfecting. And the biguanide is federally recognized as a water sanitizer, but it's not state recognized. And the things that I've been learning about chlorine is so toxic. It's really crazy toxic. And we all think it's nothing because we can smell it in our water when we drink it, and when we take a shower, we're inhaling it, and it doesn't cause a problem right away. But over time, it causes a lot of problems. So I hope float tanks across the United States that are trying to get variances kind of push the limit on how we treat water. And I found with float tanks that they're a lot more sanitary and safer than hot tubs, which are everywhere. And I did have it all in my head. I'm going back and forth. So if you want to ask me questions, that would be helpful, because I could just keep talking and I don't know what you want to really know. So I have, Michael and Nancy are totally awesome. I love them both. And I'm so happy. I told Michael today in an email, I don't know if you got that I'm happy that I'm being challenged. Because like I said, I worked my butt off for my business and I don't want to do anything wrong. And I was happy to take guidance from Bob Berger and just do everything absolutely right. And so I'm just appreciative of these two right here. So the text he sent me, the questions were all about how do we measure sanitation? How do you test ozone? How do you, if the alkaline is out of balance, how is density measured? All these things. And there are test kits out there. And with the biguanide, it's actually called Aqua Silk. It's at Leslie Pools. I think I'm going to be a regular client over at Underwater Pool Masters. And I talked to Steve over there, and he sells that. There's test strips for that. I've talked to the company that sold, so there's my company that I bought it from. He's sold 250 in this country, commercial and residential. There's 600, and now that's it could be wrong, but 600 float tanks in the country. 250 are his. There are 15 that I know of float tanks in this state, commercial float tanks in this state. And I called all of the boards of health in each town, and I asked them, how did you get this in your town? Like, what were the variances? What did they have to do? And it went from, I just checked we went with the manufacturer's guidelines to there's no guidelines, so I created my own guidelines. So I've seen a lot of different things, and when I asked the owner of the company, I said, do you have any documentation that this is safe and this is good, and where's the scientific proof? And his answer was, there's been float tanks since the 70s. and the lack of problems. There are no problems. So the lack of problems that they have out there, and it runs 24/7 unless there's a client in the tank. So the way it's run, it goes through UV light, ozone, and then it's shocked daily with hydrogen peroxide. Once a week, it has the biguanide, a tablespoon of biguanide, and I have the, oh God, there's so much stuff.
Julie, that's great. I just have a question.
Oh God,
If
you ask
you don't
questions,
mind.
because I don't
Yep,
even know
and I
where to
have one.
begin.
Yep.
And just about the overall safety, how do you feel? You've seen the actual setup.
We haven't seen the actual setup. Julie provided a handful of documents in terms of like the operating manual,
Yep.
just general equipment spec sheets and things like that. So just a quick overview on how I guess it works in terms of the pool code. In the current pool code, float tanks are considered a special purpose pool, so therefore they do fall under the pool regs. Why other communities say it doesn't, I have no clue on that one. So under the pool code, they're considered a special purpose pool. If you cannot meet the standards in the pool regs, you have to request a variance, in which you go before the Board of Health. If they approve it, then all the info gets kicked up to the state and they have the final approval.
I've called the state, and you know that.
Yes.
I've been calling
So
the state.
question,
and
so
they-
then we have to approve it first, and then after our approval, then it would go to the state for final approval?
Correct.
Okay.
And if they don't respond within 30 days, then it's assumed that they approve it.
Okay. So can I ask a question oh, go ahead, you're talking.
ask a
I just wanted to, so if I wanted to come into your float tank, talk me through,
Okay,
walk
I'm
me
so
through
glad. I'd love to
exactly.
do that.
I wanna know exactly what I would do coming in, and then what you're gonna do when I'm done.
Okay, that's good. So when somebody comes in, there is a form that you'll fill out, and we'll talk. There's some contraindications. I think the biggest contraindication would be claustrophobia, and people know if they're claustrophobic. But I would tell you the benefits of it, and I would tell you what happens. It isn't in yet because I was told that it can't be put in until it's okayed.
Okay.
So it's not there. The shower's there, and nothing else really is. And so I would tell you about it, and I would say floating is great for anxiety and stress. And what you're going to do is you're going to go into this changing area. You're going to take a shower. You're going to have no clothes on when you go into the tank, and that's beneficial for sanitation as well, because bathing suits harbor a lot of bacteria. So you open the door to the float. It's like a closet. They have pods, but I went with the room because it's less likely to have claustrophobia. People, So you open the door. You step over a 14-inch threshold into 10 inches of water. It's 10 inches of water we're talking about. It's like a bathtub, and it has 200 gallons of water. It has 1,000 pounds of salt in it. The salt, you float on top of the water. The water is 85 degrees. The air in the room is 85 degrees. Your skin is 85 degrees, so you feel really enveloped, and you're floating on top of the water. I will give you disposable ear plugs if you want them. Here is the light switch if you don't want the lights off, because it's a sensory deprivation tank. And one of the things, like when you lay down on a table, a massage table or a bed, you're supported by that bed. You're not supported by anything when you're on top of the water, and your muscles expand and you let go. And it's a really great way to relax and let go. And the most important part that happens, though, is what goes on with your head. Most people today are stressed out, and my whole business is built on de-stressing people, and I found that this is one of the best ways to help people. Yeah, first you're like, can I see my hand? You're touching the walls, you're touching, you're getting situated, and then after like 5-10 minutes, your mind starts to slow down, and when your mind slows down, you start to activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is great because that's when your body can do what it does best, and that's heal and repair. Most people live their lives in the sympathetic nervous system being activated, that fight or flight, and you're stressed out, and you can't heal when you're doing that. So this is a great way for anxiety, PTSD, people that just can't shut their brain down because it's like a forced meditation, and it slows down the brain and your body can heal. It's coupled with our sauna, and it's coupled with massage. When you come out, there's a nice quiet area as you come out where you can sit down. There's water in there. There's water outside. Could make you a tea. You have to shower afterwards because you're going to be covered in salt. So you have to shower afterwards.
Yep.
And when you leave, we clean we clean it. We clean up. We take all the water off the floor. Any water, we clean the shower. We clean down the float tank.
Is the whole tank drained?
No.
No, okay.
So there's 3 modes of sanitation: UV light, ozone, and hydrogen peroxide. And like I said, it runs 24/7. Only when you are in it, it's shut off. The lights are off. There's no sound. There's nothing. So you're going to notice after the hour float, the lights will come on automatically. There's also an intercom between you inside that tank and the front desk. There's an intercom if you need to use it. You can keep your lights on. You can have music in there if you want. I don't recommend it. And then after you get out, the filter goes back on. The filter filters.
So how soon can a next person come in?
1 hour. They recommend, here's a couple of things that I've done myself. They recommend a half an hour. And I just said, you know what, I like things blocked right. I'm going to do an hour. So it has a 36 gallon per minute rate of flowing. So in 1 hour, that thing can be drained and put back 10 times. 5 times in a half an hour, 10 times in an hour, going through UV light. And I have here some things about how they sanitize. I don't think you have it. I just did it the other day, yesterday when I...
Do your clients sign a consent of some sort?
Yes.
Yes.
So, so then the thing goes on for an hour and it goes, and I can have another person in, and then I've told people that this thing is going to be cleaned like it's never been used before. Each person, we're going to empty the trash. If there's one tissue in the trash, it's going to be like pristine. And what else did you want to know?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what else?
Oh, so who does the cleaning? Is it you
It
or
would be
somebody
me.
else?
It would be,
Or do you have staff, and
Yes,
are they,
it would be
are they
the-
trained, and how are they trained,
Yes.
and who trains them?
Yes. So I am a massage therapist and an esthetician, and I see a lot of clients all day long. I am stepping back, however, a little bit, and to support the desk in this, I'm going to train a new desk person. So it's pretty busy on the desk when they answer phones and they're booking appointments and they're doing things. So I'm hiring another person just for that, for when people come in for them to be able, to have a conversation with the client, to promote anything that's in the salon, to do the float tank, to talk about the sauna. So there's going to be a special person for that. And this is something that I've just learned myself. When iron mixes with ozone, it causes a film. And the bulb, the UV bulb, it's not in this either. I've just read it in I want it taken out every month and washed with soap and water and put back, because you don't want a film on that bulb. So that's nowhere. I just read it and I said, you know what? I'm going to add that to my maintenance schedule. So I have a maintenance schedule: daily, bi-weekly, weekly, every 6 to 9 months, and yearly. A maintenance schedule.
Julie sounds very conscientious, and I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance for the Truth Organic Spa float.
I wanna
Yeah,
go
yeah.
over the.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say
I
he
think
needs
he, I
to-
think he
Go
needs to.
into-
I agree.
So that's tabled, I guess.
Okay, go
So-
ahead and finish.
so real
telling
Let
quick,
him roll
Any,
through it.
any discussion?
So they always have different kind of testing kits to measure different things, ranging from your alkalinity, calcium hardness. I haven't come across one, but I'm sure they have one to measure the concentration of ozone in the water because you want that below a certain limit. In the pool code, it doesn't talk. In the current pool code, it doesn't talk about ozone in different levels at what it should be. We know the state has been looking at updating the new pool code. We don't know when that's going to be. Probably not now because pool season just started. Usually they're pretty nice in terms of the community sanitation program is pretty nice at waiting until after the different seasons to actually put the regs through, just to kind of get people able to adjust. From what I've heard, just through rumors, is that it was stalled a little bit because they got a lot of feedback from the float tank community. So they're trying to incorporate more into the new regs so they can address it better. Obviously, the biggest thing is going to be the sanitation because most pools and spas, they use chlorine or bromine as a source of disinfectant. In this particular unit, you're going to have ozone, UV, hydrogen peroxide, and
Biguanide.
guanide.
It's Biguanide. Biguanide.
I've never heard of that, but
I never-
it doesn't mean I'm not
I
gonna
have
look
it. You
into
know what? I'm going to give it to you. Would you like it?
Yes.
I think you have this one, ultraviolet light as a sterilization method in float tanks. I actually have some CDC stuff on float tanks.
Okay.
I don't know if you want that.
So right now the state's working to try to incorporate float tanks into the new regs. When they're coming by, we have no clue. In terms of variances, after work with Julie and Phil and really sitting down and going through the current pool regs, the different variances that we feel is going to be needed. One relates, some of them may seem simple, but it is in the pool code. Adequate lighting needed under all conditions of pool use. So theoretically, while someone is using the pool, whether it's a special purpose pool or a regular swimming pool, there should always be adequate light on. In this scenario, they have the option of leaving the light on or not. So that's one variance request there. Another one would be the walkways and decks. In the pool code, there should be at least 4 feet of unobstructed and continuous path around the any kind of pool. In this scenario, it's going to be tucked against a wall a little bit. So the actual where the door is, I'd assume you'd be able to have the 4 feet of clearance.
I think there's a 5-foot changing area before the door. I also want to say, I don't know if you guys know this, that I went to Boston to the Architectural Access Board, and it's handicap accessible as much as it can be. So I had to do that, and I think that the 4 feet, I really feel like it's more of a bathtub. And I think that when there's the regulations, it's gonna be like, it's kind of hard to make this
Aesthetic.
or like a pool
Yeah. It's
because it's a closet.
Yeah, it's hard.
Well, the
pool
concern is
code's
event
the
in an
pool
emergency,
code,
right, in
unfortunately.
event of an emergency situation, you have to have access on so many sides or so much
yeah.
feet
so-
for emergency.
But in a typical pool, you have obviously 4 ways of,
Yeah.
or whatever kind of pool it is. Usually, you can get out any direction.
Right.
This particular one, you're limited to the
door.
one entrance and one exit. So, as long I would say as long as you have the 4 feet around that, then you'll be all set. But theoretically, in the code, it does say continuously around the pool.
Yeah, it's the pool code doesn't take into account when it was written, these
Yeah,
types of
this
units.
thing was written in passed in '95 or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. It's been here for a while.
Yeah, they weren't thinking about
Nine-
tanks.
February of '98.
It's an incredible.
So they come a long way. They're obviously becoming more popular and things like that. The other one is going to be the chemical standards. In terms of the code, they list chlorine or bromine or some other approved method as approved by Board of Health and the department, meaning the Department of Public Health. So listed in the regs is just chlorine and bromine, and they have their standards for that. So technically, you would need a variance because you wouldn't be using the ones there unless the state were to approve an alternative. And then the water quality maintenance, which would be just the continuous filtration. So in this particular circumstance, clients come in for an hour. During that hour, the float tank is not operating in terms of the pumps and everything. After that, it's running for an hour or in between all the clients, and then throughout the day when no one is in it.
And overnight.
And overnight. So technically, there is no continuous filtration while there are clients in it. And under that one, as well as any special purpose pool, is supposed to be drained every 14 days. In this particular circumstance, because they have 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt, it is very costly. And I believe in the equipment specs that you had sent, they recommend it to be cleaned, thoroughly cleaned and drained every 6 months.
Yes. Yes, I have it.
So those are the main variances that you would be seeking in terms of having this float tank approved. For me, I haven't fully gone. I haven't. I don't. And I have all the data sheets related to the how do you say it? Quinine.
Beguinide.
Beguinide. I don't know much about it. I don't know. I know the EPA, they have a list of approved sanitizers, whether it's on there. I have no clue. Just reading a couple of CDC articles today, some of them had mentioned that the hydrogen peroxide isn't an approved disinfectant for something like this. Quickly looking at the list, which was short, but there were some depending on the company, but it would all depend on the actual product and whether they have the EPA registration.
It's used, hydroperoxide is used in hospitals and laboratories to wipe down the laboratory, and they also use it as a gas in people with tuberculosis in rooms, and the gas kills the tuberculosis. I have it written about how great it is, and that Europe recognizes it, and it's not really harmful as chlorine or bromide.
Yeah, I think a lot of it comes
And
down
even
to
salt is disinfecting. You can't really say that because that's,
Yeah.
but it's,
hydrogen peroxide comes down to the fact you're putting it in water.
an oxidizer is a powerful disinfectant. Oxidation.
When you mix, like you said, you kind of mixing it with water, with salt. It's getting filtered through the ozone and UV, so the properties of it could change where it may not be as effective, which may be why it may not be listed as a disinfectant. But
Okay.
the science behind that, I'm not entirely sure.
But like I said, there's 600 float tanks in this country. 250 are from the people that I bought mine from, and it's like, when I asked him about it, the safety, he's like, the lack of problems. And he went to go on and tell me all the different states, and he said Wisconsin was a really hard state. They shut everybody down in the state, and there was a big outcry, and then they threw in the towel, and now they're the easiest state, and there's more float tanks in Wisconsin than ever, and there aren't any problems, and I feel like that has a lot to do. That's a lot to say.
Yeah, but it still has to get through Massachusetts.
Mass State.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts?
Even if it gets past us, it still
Right.
needs to get to Mass.
But you know what? When I call them, they've said to me 2 or 3 times, it's up to your town. I called them for information, and they said, we don't have any regulations for float tanks. We won't have them till late summer. It's up to your towns.
Yeah, but it still holds by the pool code.
Okay.
So, for most of the variances, I don't have a problem with. The only thing is with regard to the chemical standards. At the current moment, because I don't know too much about the
Whatever
the-
that is.
yeah,
the
whatever
big
this
one.
chemical is.
The new
And then I personally, I don't know why I didn't think to check the EPA website for registered disinfectants to see if ozone or UV is on there and things like that. So I'm not too familiar with the chemical standards as it relates to this product. And I am continuously learning about the other ones and how they interact with everything in terms of keeping overall the sanitation and any kind of the bad bacteria that could be in the water. So at the current moment for me, I wouldn't recommend it just until we learn a little bit more about this chemical along with the different treatments. But at the end of the day, it is up to
Julie,
you
what's your
guys.
timeline?
Okay. I bought it last year. I've been paying $1,000 a month on it, and I feel like I'm losing money every day. I've been trying to get it through. How many times have I met with you? I love going in the office, but it's
It's getting frustrating.
It's getting very frustrating. And the thing is, I know where you guys are standing. I know what you're thinking. You're the public health.
And we're also gonna be setting an example for other other places in the area that wanna do this, so.
There's one in West Boylston. There's
But I'm
one
saying
in
that
Natick.
in the other areas, what if we
There's
do
a big
approve
float
this?
center in Natick.
Right, so then other towns are gonna be looking to us to say, what did you do, how did you do this, we wanna do it. So we wanna make sure that we're doing it right, and that it is obviously safe. It certainly sounds like you've done your, your due diligence with everything.
Yeah, there's a lot that goes into it. And like I said, if once and if it does pass us, then it does go to the state as well, and they have the opportunity to review it and comment and provide any. I don't know what they would provide or say. I've never sent one to the state.
I'm gonna make the motion again, but not everybody's gonna agree, but I'd like to make a motion to grant the variance.
So it's technically 4 variances, right?
For,
5.
5?
I have 5 different things. Is it
Some of
possible?
them fall under
Okay.
specific ones.
Is it possible to grant the variance, but have it be specific to the chemical to make sure there's like, as part of the granting of the variance, that there's
an
enough
exception.
time to do enough research on the chemical side of things? But I'm just thinking our next meeting is not scheduled until July 1st.
Yeah, it's a whole month.
Then my other question is too, if we, approve if we approve the variance and then he does his
with that exception.
last, with that exception,
right.
and then it goes to the state, if the state didn't approve it, then does it come back to us or to Julie to fix things to be approved?
I would assume so. I think it would-
Right,
they were-
so I
they
think
would
we
say
need to, then I
X,
think we
Y,
need to
and Z.
try to move forward with
Yeah.
her.
Yeah.
All right,
So I'd like to make that motion to approve, the variances with the exception of the chemical one, for Truth Organic Spa float tank installation.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay.
What does that mean?
That means we still,
That means we still have to go to the state.
Oh, okay.
It still has, everything's gonna have to go to the state.
Still go to the
regardless.
state.
Right.
But we feel at least if we start the process,
right,
then at least it can go to the state. And if the
Yeah.
state says, no, you need to do something different,
Right.
then it comes back and we fix it. But at least
clearly,
you're on the road
clearly
to
you've
getting to
done-
the state.
You've
I'll
done your
double
research.
check too if we are the ones that approve an alternative method for disinfectant, or if the state would be the alternative.
Okay,
And then if so, then obviously we can just kick that right up.
great. Thank you.
Thank you
Julie.
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
Do
your
you have any
Yeah.
more?
You're a toughie.
Do you have any more
But you
information
don't
like
want them
this?
coming after you after
Can
the
I see
fact.
that B word, is that B word written there somewhere?
Or the state to
Good
shoot you
idea.
down. Like if we just let this ride and it went to the state,
I
It
don't
would
think
get-
they've never had one.
yeah, which is not
They've
always
never
a
had one.
positive.
But
Yeah.
but there's 15 in this state.
Yeah, so you'd set a
operating.
precedent for all the other ones to get looked at.
Well, I feel like if they say no to me, that's like not good.
Well, but if you're the first one they saw, like if you were the first one that actually went before the state, you'd get extra scrutinized because you'd probably be the first one that they've ever seen. And then they'd start going and finding the other 15.
They know
Knock
they're
on
out
their
there.
doors.
They know they're out there, and they're putting together. I would love to be part of the board. They're putting together
What?
regulations.
Well,
as we
yeah,
speak.
because that will help not have to deal with it being a special pool
Right,
and fitting into these things that just
Right.
don't jive with
like a
a float tank.
flotation device.
And thanks for your.
Thank
Hey,
you.
Yes,
Wait,
thank you
so
for your
much.
patience
Before you leave,
tonight.
do you have any more
Yes.
data related to the actual float tank that I can have to review
Like what?
that I don't already have?
And how much, can I ask how much you're charging for an hour?
$49 for your first float. How's that?
Oh, wow.
So I have hydrogen peroxide,
Okay.
ozone and water,
After
and
we do
UV
the variance,
disinfection.
it's not a problem.
I'm,
This one is from the CDC.
What? Okay. Can I keep these? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Alliance update.
Excuse me, Karen.
Oh,
The Susies are here to
nope. Is there,
11 Putnam
okay,
to be signed.
sorry. We had some entertainment at least.
I understood about a third of what was going on.
I learned a lot more about MRC than I didn't know.
All right, I have a permit here for disposal system construction permit for 11 Putnam.
Any variances or just regular business?
Oh, it looks like approved by Phil. Looks like-
Move this out of the way because I'll otherwise I'll smack it, and that will not be good because I'm not used to having a jug of water in front of me. All right. So no variance or anything, right?
But that was the nitrogen aggregation. that was there.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Okay. House will become the 4 existing separate 100-foot from the well. Setback. Gonna put in the other well. And blower and vent to be retained there.
So now. So the letter from the story. Yes. From us or from her?
Do we have a June update?
That was John.
Okay.
It's the wrong day, wrong month.
It'll be
Okay.
approved.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you for sticking around.
I don't have to, I don't take anything with me or anything like that.
Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Doesn't specify. Doesn't specify.
Was
We can probably put it up. We know the guy, the director.
Okay.
Not here for the entertainment. All right, now Alliance.
Now you
update.
can go ahead.
Alright. My first or you?
You can go.
Alright, there was 15 routine inspections within the month of May. This is actually, in terms of being compliant, it was pretty good this month. Apple Tree Arch, they do very general things there. Didn't really know anything there. Bradishton, we did their pre-op inspection, so they'll open up for the year. Just mainly with them, we're just going over the new food code changes, and they already started some of them, but just kind of going over things with that. Cumberland Farms in the South Grafton, we had a couple odor issues. Found that they had an old basement that wasn't properly sealed off. But since then, I reached out to their food coordinator, and they're working in terms of cleaning up the different odors and things like that. So I'll be following with them
There was
soon.
a basement in the building.
I know. Yeah, I had no clue, and a lot of people didn't. Old little building. Cumberland Farms, North Grafton. Just cleaning the top of some of the dusty equipment and posting their signs and permits. For the most part, most of the schools were pretty good, very minor violations, if any. Village Dairy, we had some more recent expired foods that they did pull off the shelf and remove during the inspection. Pepperoni Express, they seem to be getting a little bit better, which is always great news. Just obviously keep with them is just keeping up with routine cleaning, staying on top of staff, having good active managerial control. U-Inc, just keeping up with their logs in terms of their dishwasher and things like that. Just make sure it's working properly. The Brigham Hill Community Barn, I didn't have anything. And then the Point Rock Estates Pool and Spa, they passed their inspections to open up for the season.
All right.
Any questions on the stop inspections?
Nope.
Got a couple general complaints. 12 Murray Ave was a no heat or hot water complaint, and that is in the process of being repaired. I spoke with the owner this morning, and I believe he said he was going to try to have someone come out today to repair those. 28 Main Street, that was a trash complaint regarding trash outside, along with a cleanliness issue in one of the units. We had to refer that to an appropriate agency in terms of the unit for its touchy subject matter, and then the trash is just trying to monitor that they don't put the trash out early. 10 North Main, that was a no electric, they didn't have electric, got the complaint from the police. I spoke with the owner and the occupants. The occupants said they were in the process of moving out, and the owner said that they were supposed to have been moved out a while ago, and we found with them on Wednesday to see if it is currently vacant. 75 Waterville, that was an odor complaint that Phil took care of. It was related to septic. I believe they just had to have their septic tank pumped. And then another odor complaint at 42 Manual Drive regarding compost and mulch, which is in the process of being rectified. And then that's it.
A couple other quick things just to bring to your attention. Our quarterly alliance meeting, which is going to be on July 24th in Holden at the town hall at 12:30 to 2. Lunch is always provided. The focus of that meeting is going to be on emergency dispensing sites and how towns locally can plan for, practice, staff, and respond to an emergency that involves an emergency dispensing site. So specifically in light of tonight's conversation, I would highly suggest if anyone can attend that meeting from the town, please feel free to pass that on to other people that work in town that you feel would be appropriate to attend.
Is Holden one of the 16 towns in the Greater Grafton?
No.
No.
Okay.
It's in the Alliance.
The summer internship program, the Alliance and the Academic Health Collaborative is up and running now for spring internships. For summer internships, spring just ended. If anyone is in need of an intern for a project, big or small, over the summer, please let Kelsey know. Her contact information is on the Alliance update. And then lastly, in terms of nursing, blood pressure clinic for the Housing Authority is on June 12th. For the Senior Center is on June 20th. It looks like there was the first shingles vaccine was held on the 8th, and then the second is scheduled for July 10th. Does anybody have any additional questions on this?
Nancy, how many shingles vaccines did they?
We did 20.
20?
We're only getting
And that's
five.
all you're doing is the 20?
We're only getting 5 doses at a
Yep.
time.
Yeah, and you're already scheduled
July.
folks,
The second, yep.
the folks who signed
July
up for
10th
the
is
first
the
one got
first shot,
scheduled.
Second shot
Yep.
and the.
Okay, so it's just the total of 20?
So the goal is to do a total of 100 people.
Okay,
this year.
yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys.
Thank you. Do we want to talk before meeting schedule? Do we want to do 135 Westboro Road septic update?
Yep,
Yeah.
sure.
And let you guys go since it's 8 o'clock.
All right.
So real quick on that one, I did drive by there. This is for Westboro.
Oh,
I did drive by there today, and they did have a. I believe it was Chase Harris that was pumping. They did have one of the trucks out there today, and it looked like they were pumping it.
And then Nancy.
Prior
had
to
said-
that, it looked like it had been 5:30, which would have been Thursday,
Yep, Thursday.
and that was 4,500 gallons, which is one of the largest recently.
Yeah.
Oh,
And they
nope,
still-
10 days before that, it was 5,000, okay.
They still pumping like every 4.
Yeah, 3 or 4 days.
3 or 4 days, it looks like every 3 or 4 days here, yeah. Where are we at with the sewer?
I don't know, that's why I was gonna see if for next month we can get some information from the owner
Right.
of the building.
Cause it's already spring.
Well, and it was also on the Board of
I mean, asking
Selectmen's,
for an update,
yeah,
just a quick email.
yeah.
Never
Because it was
received
also at a
anything.
Board of Selectmen's meeting that there's a buyer for the building, and I don't know that that can happen. I suppose with a commercial building, if it doesn't involve a bank, you can sell a building, but then I think it would have to go to the building department and us in terms of a new owner opening a new enterprise there. So that's, if the owner of the building could give us an update on that, all of that, for the next meeting, that'd be great.
Oh, I would hate for somebody to come in and buy it that's with a failed septic system and
Yeah.
no sewer yet.
Do we have an estimation as to when the town sewer will reach that?
No, that's what we should find
That's what
out.
you're saying, yeah, we don't know when the
For
sewer.
next meeting, hopefully we'll get that complete timetable.
I know the sign says April to August on the
Yeah.
traffic route
Oh, yeah.
sign. So hopefully by the next meeting it'll
Yeah.
be another month or so.
Right.
We have no other permits in here other
Okay.
than that one. Or licenses? I don't have anything. No.
So then,
Thank you, folks.
Thank you.
thank you.
Have a good night.
Bye, guys.
Actually, before you go.
Yep.
Could we talk about the next meeting if we need to reschedule that?
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, we'll just talk
Oh, right.
about all the, so we had July 1st as our next meeting.
Which I thought I could go, but I cannot make.
And I definitely cannot go.
I can't either.
Okay.
So
Oh,
So-
then I'll come by myself. But actually, I may not be reappointed tomorrow, so I may not be here anymore.
So how about the following week? Can you make the 8th?
Yes,
I
I was
can
gonna
make
actually suggest that.
yeah,
Friday.
I can't, but as long as there's
Okay.
quorum, that's what matters.
So we'd like to change
July
that
8th?
to the 8th. That's okay.
Alright, so then we have August 5th, which so
Yep,
far
that
doesn't sound
looks
like a
good.
problem. Then we start talking the fall and winter, seriously.
So as long as you guys can do July 8th. Yeah. Thank you.
Like, then we start talking fall and
Good
winter.
night.
Already though?
I get to sign this.
Yeah, whatever. Sounds good.
Do you have the Board of Health payroll?
He does. He just signed it. Here's one mail.
Now?
What about minutes? Do we have any minutes?
No minutes.
Alright, do we wanna talk the fall, September, October, November, December
Sure.
dates? Alright, so we have August 5th, which means September 2nd is the first one, but that's obviously Labor Day.
Labor Day.
So then, do we wanna aim for September 9th? Which would be the next Monday.
Yep, looks okay.
Okay.
Alright, so then that's 1 month would be October 7th.
When's town
because,
meeting?
Yeah, I don't know about town meeting.
Let's see if I can find it.
I don't think it's that early.
No, it's
No,
probably
no. Okay, so we probably should be okay October 7th.
Yep,
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and that's not a holiday yet, so.
Nope.
October 7th, so then 1 month after that is November 4th.
Looks okay to me.
Alright, and then 1 month after that, although sometimes in December we do two.
Two. Yeah.
So if we do 1 month, it's December 2nd, which I will not be here unless something changes. But as of right now, I will not be here on December 2nd.
All right.
You
And
wanna do
then
the
what's
9th?
what's the end of December there?
We usually do two. The end would be, you either have the 23rd or the 30th, are Mondays.
Do we want to try the 30th?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, the 30th. Because the 30th, yeah, it's not the 31st, it's the 30th.
we usually do
Okay.
two in December because of permit
Permit
season.
signing, yeah.
Signed, yeah.
Permit season.
I think I'm gonna get everybody for Christmas their own stamp.
It's like every time it becomes the time, I'm always like, oh, I really wish I had a stamp.
I have no other mail or nothing. Oh, I have that one piece of
Oh,
mail there.
Sorry. No. This is
Triano.
Triano. Notice of enforcement conference, we just get CC'd. Let's look. This one different, same? Oh no, it's another one that came in since then. It's another one regarding non-compliance and June 5th for a meeting with him.
Which is this Wednesday, I think, right?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so sounds like they're continuing.
Yep.
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that motion.
All
All
in
in favor?
favor?
Aye.
Aye.